Well, before there was a fair break tournament, I met a man named Sean Martin who told me he planned to set up a women's international cricket league or tournament or one-off event. This was in 2013, I think, is when I met him. And it was like someone explaining YouTube to you in 1998. Like, I understood the basic premise of it and it made a lot of sense. But there's a big part of me thinking, wait, how on earth will any of this work out?
This is the last note. My dad told me to say this.
And it's probably why it took Sean Martin almost a decade to actually make this thing work. Because when he came up with the idea, women weren't professional. The women's game was still getting used to being part of the ICC after having been run on its own. Many major boards ignored their teams, and associate women's cricket was a bit of a wasteland at times. And one of the reasons cricket was struggling to convince the Olympics that it should be there, or at least those people in cricket who wanted it to be there, was the lack of quality in the women's game. The Olympics were having a look at the game and going, wait a minute, you've only got a handful of teams that are really strong here. And this was an Olympics that understood the financial draw of the Indian and even Pakistan men's team, right? They understood how important it could be to get to those audiences, but they were still looking at women's cricket and saying, I don't know, this doesn't look great to me. So Sean Martin's league, which went on to become what Fair Break is now, was trying to make a competition work when nothing else in women's cricket kind of existed at all at that point. 9 years later, of course, women's cricket is massively different. The stories of the Brazilian, Thai, and Bangladesh women have just shown how much things have changed. The game has developed on the field, especially, but even off the field with sponsorship deals and Sanamer's perfume line and all these different things that are happening in women's cricket right now that didn't happen before. But in that big period when Fair Break was trying to be born, it also came up against just normal everyday cricket problems like the boards themselves. Since Kerry Packer, the cricket boards have never really been huge fans of outsiders paying their players. It embarrasses them, it takes money from their pocket, weakens their powers, and usually shows them up for their treatment of players. And all of that would have happened with this Fair Break idea. I mean, an independent company saying they could make money off women's cricket when at the same time women's cricket was completely amateur. And when I say completely amateur, when the Fair Break idea started, the ECB, BCCI and Cricket Australia didn't actually have professional women players. And now you've got someone else coming in and offering them money and conditions and trying to help everyone out. But then Fair Break ran into the next problem, which was that women's cricket actually did become a little bit more important and a little bit more financially stable. People started watching it, and more importantly, sponsors really like it. Often the same companies that aren't as interested in sponsoring men's cricket like to sponsor women's cricket. And for the boards, this is a huge boom. So in a way, Fair Break was now going up directly against how the boards thought they could make money out of women's cricket. And on top of that, the boards were thinking that if someone else was paying them, these women would not be as loyal to them, which is obviously true. That's kind of how jobs work, or at least should. And of course, over the last couple of years, we had the Women's Big Bash, then we had the Women's 100, we will probably have a Women's PSL, a Women's IPL, a Women's CPL, all of these leagues are coming, which means that some of these boards were looking at this going, well, we definitely don't want this outsider involved. They were thinking directly that a big independent tournament wouldn't help them. But it turns out that Fair Break isn't actually quite the big rebel league that everyone was afraid it was going to be. Fair Break partnered with Cricket Hong Kong, which tactically was a brilliant idea, as it means this is an ICC sanctioned event. The women playing in this need NOCs from their home boards, which is fairly normal, and most players around the world would need that to play for all these different tournaments. So it's not like the Indian Cricket League, and it isn't meaning that women have to decide between playing in Fair Break and playing for their international careers. And that's another very important thing. This is not a rebel league, it is a proper, normal franchise league. And this league is paying the players a pretty good sum. There are some players on around $20,000, which is comparable to a good fee for a men's T20 league. The original wages for the 100 and the Women's Big Bash, especially at the lower end, were really quite poor, especially when you factor in they were playing for major cricket bodies that had a lot of funding. But one of the most important things about Fair Break is the money is coming in directly for women's cricket. This isn't money coming in from the men's game that is being siphoned off. And I think most opponents of women's sport at this point still cling to the fact that it needs money from the men's game to survive. This is a league on its own that is already funded and operational, and that has been able to get many of the best players in the world to it. We're looking at a completely different model here. And I think many of us who studied women's cricket know that this was always on the cards. There's certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, you could see that there are many sponsors who want to be involved in this. They want to be seen as good global citizens. They want to be involved in cricket, but they also don't want their ads to go up against, ads for erectile dysfunction or bald men, right? And so women's cricket actually plays to a different kind of market. All these things happen. Again, when fair break started, this was not really a thing, but this has certainly come in. And because they have money, they can get good players. I mean, Susie Bates is playing in this. She's like proper cricket royalty at this point. And as I mentioned before, Sana Moore and Heather Knight and Mignon Dupreez and Stephanie Taylor. There's a lot of very big name players that you will have seen or heard of playing in this tournament. However, I think maybe the most important thing is there's actually a lot of players just from everywhere in this tournament. If you go down the list, Nepal, Hong Kong, PNG, Netherlands, Kuwait, the Philippines, Bhutan. This is not where you normally associate T20 franchise players from coming from. The Fair Break tournament is a properly global event, not just in its name, but they actually are getting players from all around the world. There are 90 cricketers who have been contracted for this event, and they come from 36 different nations. I'm not saying that's never happened in a men's tournament before, but I certainly can't think of it. And there seems to be a lot of players who are coming from countries that I've never seen in any franchise events before. This is just something really new and interesting for cricket. And as happened with the first World Cup in cricket, it's been pioneered by the women's game, who probably had to do something like this in order to get all those sponsors involved. But part of the reason was that the original idea of this tournament was also different to most of the pop-up cricket leagues that we see today. It wasn't there to cash in on a fad or get a bunch of TV rights or ensure that there was a lot of money to be made from betting. It was designed to help more women become professional. It was a tournament from the start that was there to improve the game of cricket. I just don't think we've ever had much of that in our sport. And I don't know which team you should support, though clearly it shouldn't be the Barmy Army team. I'm not quite sure how good the quality is always going to be. It should vary greatly between, Susie Bates and a player from Bhutan. But what I do know is that a bunch of people who love cricket got together to try and improve the game. And for whatever Fair Break might become, it at least started as that. And I believe that is worth supporting.